With all the excitement that is going on around here and in the world, thank you for being here this morning. We talk about, while that's all going on, we're keeping the House running here. Very proud of Joaquin Castro's legislation to overturn the president's ill-conceived idea about undermining the Constitution of the United States. Very proud of the work he did to have us be ready when the president took his action so that the House, was ready to honor the institution in which we serve. Article 1 of the Constitution, the legislative branch. We've sent the legislation now over to the Senate. Yesterday was a big day for us. For many of us who have worked for years on gun violence prevention, it was a big day when the Bipartisan Background Check Act of 2019 passed with such a strong vote on the floor of the House. The night before, many of us were at to observe the 25th anniversary of the Brady Bill. That was historic when it happened and has saved many lives since. Millions of people have not been able to get, not millions of people, millions of times people have not been able to get a gun who shouldn't have a gun. But now we had to expand it to include online sales and gun show sales as well, which happened yesterday. Just anecdotally, I was especially happy because of all Mike Thompson worked for such a long time, the chair of our Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. It's a bipartisan bill with Congressman King of New York. To have Congresswoman McBath tell her story of her son losing his life, it was policy and personal. I just anecdotally tell the story of when we passed the bill before, the Brady Bill. I was a relatively new member of Congress. Chuck Schumer, now the leader in the Senate, was our champion. He led the way, and he was fearless. But some of us had just the grassroots, the retail member-to-member contacts, and the first time we did not succeed to pass the rule. So some of us went over to see Mr. Brady, a person from your profession, really such a talented man who, as you know, was shot at the same time President Reagan sadly was. He and Sarah have been such an inspiration. She, the guardian angel of it all for so many years, even after his passing. But anyway, that day we went over, some of us, and we were so in awe of Jim Brady. And so we went over, and after we had lost the vote, and said, we're here for two reasons: to whip the rule and to pay our respects to you. To which he said, without a second, said, well, at least you accomplished one of those things. Anyway, they were relentless. They made a difference. The beat goes on as we continue. At the same time, we're following through with what we promised in the campaign for the people. One, to lower the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs and to preserve the pre-existing condition benefit. The Energy and Commerce Committee has already had a hearing on the prescription drug cost. The Ways and Means will do so very shortly. They have also in the committee had hearings on the Affordable Care Act and protecting the pre-existing condition. Lower health care costs, bigger paychecks by building the infrastructure of America in a green, modern way. And in that regard, the one committee, the Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, has had their hearing with governors and others, mayors, to build the record as we go forward for legislation. Yesterday, in the Education and Workforce Committee, they already marked up a bill for school construction, which will be part of the infrastructure legislation. Build infrastructure, bigger paychecks. Part of the bigger paychecks is the equal pay for equal work legislation, which was marked up in committee yesterday, too. So of the three things, lower health care costs, bigger paychecks. The third, H.R. 1, cleaner government. That bill is marked up. It will come to the floor perhaps next week. We're very excited about it because it reduces the role of big, dark, special interest money in politics, and it also strives to reduce the voter suppression that is so prevalent in our country. We were pleased to reestablish the Elections Task Subcommittee and the House Administration Committee headed by Marcia Fudge. She had their first hearing out of Washington in Brownsville, Texas, a couple of weeks ago. Very well attended, very important. Part of H.R. 1, though, is also to reassert and repass the H.R. 4, which is the Voting Rights Act, headed by Terry Sewell of Alabama. We introduced it this week in preparation for the visit to Selma this weekend, the first weekend in March, as you know. So those are the three. In addition to that, we said we're going to pass gun violence prevention. We did yesterday in the House, and now it goes on. We have another bill on the floor today to expand on that in terms of a timetable. We said we're going to do the Equality Act, and we'll be marking that. We'll be announcing that in about 10 days, 2 weeks perhaps. We're going to do Dreamers and TPS in the same time frame. And as I said, we'll continue with the equal pay for equal work. So we are, again, there are a lot of high-profile events going on around here, but our work to support the financial being of America's working families goes on. The president is returning from Vietnam from his meeting with Kim Jong-un. I guess it took 2 meetings for him to realize that Kim Jong-un is not on the level. He was a big winner, Kim Jong-un, in getting to sit face-to-face with the most powerful person in the world, the President of the United States. And really, it's good that the president did not give him anything for the little that he was proposing. As you probably know, he said he would shut down well, he said he was going to, the Yangbyan. That Yangbyan has been a subject for a long time. He would shut that down, but what we want is denuclearization. They didn't agree to it in the first meeting. They didn't agree to it in the second meeting. And as you know, they wanted lifting sanctions without the denuclearization. I'm glad that the president walked away from that. Diplomacy is important. We always support it. But the prospect for success, God bless you, the prospect for success seemed dim in light of the insincerity of Kim Jong-un. I've been, as many of you know, to North Korea, to Pyongyang, beyond the DMZ, and very serious concerns about North Korea, always hopeful that diplomacy can take us to a place ever suspicious of the motivations of a person like Kim Jong-un. So I'm glad that that didn't work. Earlier, last weekend, I was pleased to lead a delegation to the Munich Security Conference and then on to Brussels for NATO meetings. I'm proud to say that our delegation was part of other delegations that went. Over 50 members of Congress were there, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, reasserting our commitment to the transatlantic relationship between the U.S. and Europe, as well as our commitment to NATO to strengthen it. People seem very happy to see such bipartisanship, House and Senate, with a very positive message of the importance of that region to us. So those are some of the things that have been going on here. And right now we're debating the second bill, H.R. 1112, for gun violence prevention. So if I run out the door, it's because I have to go make a vote. Yes, ma'am. No, Katie.
Of the United States seemed to side with Kim Jong-un on the question of Otto Warmbier, the American student who died after being in North Korean custody. What's your reaction?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what the president has said about that.
He was asked about it, and he seemed to say that Kim Jong-un denied a role in this and that he believed Kim Jong-un.
Well, see, as I said, I don't think Kim Jong-un is on the level, and the president has believed Putin as opposed to believing his own intelligence leadership on subjects. So, I didn't know the president had said that, but it's strange. And I don't know, there's something wrong with Putin, Kim Jong-un, in my view, thugs that the president chooses to believe. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, what should the consequence be if the president did violate campaign finance laws while in office?
You know, I haven't, let me just say, I read you what we're doing here. We're constantly busy. And so I didn't sit down and watch the proceedings yesterday. But I do know what I saw in the reporting of many of you is that Chairman Cummings was just a magnificent maestro. And each and every one of our members did a very good job in trying to elicit the truth, to try to get to the facts. Some of it was confirmation, as Jerry Connolly said. Some of it confirmed things that they had heard otherwise. And some of it, as you heard, was possibly new. Some of the high-profile statements seem new. Again, I'm not in any position to verify what he said, but that would be Mr. Cummings had, I trust his judgment, and he had some questions about suspicions that might be true.
Would that be an impeachable offense?
Well, I'm not going into that. We have two investigations, the Mueller report that we're all anxiously awaiting, and as was indicated, the one thing I did see widely reported was that the witness said that other issues that he was aware of were under consideration by the Southern District of New York. So let's see what that is. But again, impeachment is a divisive issue in our country. And let us see what the facts are, what the law is, and what the behavior is of the president. I've said to some of you running up and down the hall, right now, what I'm concerned about is the president's undermining of the Constitution of the United States, which, with his, again, ill-advised declaration, I think he was totally wrong. I was at the border this past weekend. What he's proposing is going on there is mythology. It is not reality. I wish you could all go to Laredo for the week of the birthday of George Washington and honoring George Washington, Martha Washington, so patriotic, such pride and heritage, such patriotism about America. So that concerns me more than what may or may not be said now. When the facts are known, then we'll make a judgment then. I'm also concerned about what the president is doing in denial of what is happening in terms of climate change in our public policy arena, that he is still in denial. I'm concerned about his heaping praise on a tax bill that gives 83% of the benefits to the top 1% and ignores the needs of people as we write budgets. So I'm more concerned about his policy than his personality. However, when the facts are known, then we can make a judgment. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, on the gun votes, you're a good vote counter. What do you think the chances are that either of these can get 60 votes in the Senate? And if they cannot advance in the Senate, what would you say they've achieved, if anything?
Well, these bills are bipartisan, especially the one yesterday, which was the heart of the one that that we have worked so hard on for such a long time. Today is an important continuation of that. You've heard me say it over and over. Public sentiment is everything. 90% of the American people support background checks, even members of the National Rifle Association. Most of them who are gun owners have had their background checks, and they have they personally don't avoid that. So 90%. Some of the figures are stunning, though. Do you know that 43 children or teenagers die from gun violence in our country in a day? So I think public sentiment is going to play. I quote him all the time, Abraham Lincoln, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. Public sentiment is there. I think the public is tired of moments of silence, a time of mass murders and high-profile tragedies. But these tragedies happen in the lives of American people every single day of the week. So I count the votes in the House, not in the Senate, as you know, but I do think that when the opportunity is there for a bipartisan bill, which is very discreet and focused, and is the bill that will save the most lives, that hopefully we can get a positive vote from the Senate.
Speaker?
Yes, sir.
Last question.
Yesterday, the House Republicans passed another motion to recommit with the ICE amendment on that gun vote.
Yeah.
And there's some reports out there that Democratic leaders and yourself are considering changing House rules to perhaps get more notice and have members more time to read these motions to recommit. How seriously are you considering these changes? And then also the minority leader's office is threatening that this would ground all legislation to a halt if you do take these steps.
Well, I don't know that he has the authority to do that. The power of the Speaker is awesome. However, they should remember that. However, I'm a big believer in respecting the whole House and the rights of the minority to have their say. I do put me in a different category. I think you should just vote against all motions to recommit. It's a procedural vote. It's a gotcha on the part of the opposition. Let's make life easy. Just vote against them. Should there be some review of everything that we do? We have now a modernization select committee on modernization from our side, chaired from our side, yes, by Derek Kilmer of Washington State, and they are going to be having open hearings on issues of concern to, well, let me make their announcement about their agenda. But I think that's an appropriate place for some of that discussion to take place. In the meantime, vote no.
Madam Speaker, to that end on that question about the...
I thought it was the last question. Does Chad have special...
No, but the power of Chad is awesome.
Do you agree, or is that a one-man show?
If you indulge me to follow up on John's question.
Maybe so, maybe not. Let's see.
The idea, though, that some of these roll call votes on MTRs are good votes for your members to show voting against leadership if they're from swing districts, if they're freshmen. That was certainly the case in 07. Is that not a good vote for some of them to take?
No, vote no.
How so?
Vote
Explain.
no. Just vote no, because the fact is, a vote yes is to give leverage to the other side, to surrender the leverage on the floor of the House. So again, we have, our members are so fabulous and they're so great. Weren't they wonderful in the hearing yesterday, and now they're behind closed doors in intelligence. If it weren't for you, as ex officio, I'd love to just be in that room and hear what's going on, but I unfortunately don't have time for that. No, my view is that they should vote no on it. There are plenty other times when they can vote no, express their, shall we say, opposition to the leadership on the form of a bill, to vote against a bill. But in terms of the order of the House, it's a procedural vote. I suggest a no vote. Should there be some discussion of any of what we do here, we now have established a modernization select committee on modernization of Congress, and happily, the minority leader has appointed people to it. We're still waiting for his appointments to the select committee on climate. Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.
All right. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi taking a couple of questions there, specifically related to the president's comments on Otto Warmbier in Hanoi, Vietnam. The president was asked about the subsequent death of Otto Warmbier, who had been held in a North Korean prison. The president saying that he had spoken to Chairman Kim about it and that the chairman told him he knew nothing about it, and the president took him at his word. So there was a question about that. And Nancy Pelosi indicated that in the same instance that the president has oftentimes been very approving of moves made by authoritarian leaders like Vladimir Putin. It wasn't surprising to her. And then there was another question about campaign finance law. That came from our own Nancy Cordes, who is going to be joining me to talk about that in just a moment. We will get into it. I can't hear anything in my ear. So I don't know if Nancy's available or if the producers are talking to me because I have lost communications. But the question from Nancy Cordes to Nancy Pelosi was about violating campaign finance law. Nancy, you are there. You asked that question. I can't hear you, so I'm just going to ask you to just relay to our audience what the question that you directed to Speaker Pelosi and what her response was.
Got it. So, after this 6-7 hour hearing with Michael Cohen yesterday, as lawmakers came out of the room, I asked the chair of that committee, Elijah Cummings, whether based on what he had heard from Michael Cohen, he believed that the president had committed a campaign finance violation while in office. And Elijah Cummings said, yes, he believes the president did. This has to do with that $35,000 check that Michael Cohen brought with him. He said that the president paid him in installments to make it look like a legal retainer, when actually what it was repaying Michael Cohen for the $130,000 hush money payment that Cohen had made to the porn star Stormy Daniels to earn her silence after her affair with the president during campaign season. And Cohen said that he had to take out a personal home equity loan in order to make that big payment to Stormy Daniels. Cohen has already pled guilty to a campaign finance violation, so it would stand to reason that if the president was involved as well, then he would get caught up in that legally as well. So that was my question to Cummings yesterday. Today, my question to the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, was, okay, if it is found that he did violate campaign finance laws, what should the consequence be? And she didn't really bite. She said that she hadn't paid that close attention to the hearing yesterday. It is her understanding, she said, that there will be more hearings, that there are leads that they want to follow up on, and also that the Southern District of New York is taking a look at various acts committed by the president and people around him. And so she would wait to see what happens both in the Southern District of New York and here on Capitol Hill before making a judgment like that about what kind of consequence there should be. I followed up by asking her whether she thought it was an impeachable offense. And she said that it's not something that she wants to go into right now. As you know, Vlad, she has long said, and many of her fellow Democrats have followed suit, that impeachment is not what they are focused on right now. And she actually argued that there are a lot of things that the president is doing right now that concern her far more greatly than whether he wrote a check to Michael Cohen from the Oval Office in mid-2017. She listed his declaration of a national emergency. She talked about his denial of climate change. She said those are the kinds of things that disturb her and are taking up her attention right now, and that impeachment is something that they will deal with if and when it becomes an issue down the road.
Well, the other thing, Nancy, that I thought was sort of intriguing about what Speaker Pelosi said was she described how brilliantly Elijah Cummings handled that testimony from Michael Cohen yesterday as chairman of the House Oversight Committee. And I am intrigued by one thing. It seemed to suggest that she seemed to be suggesting that, look, if there's going to be a follow-up on some of the leads that people are inquiring about, that it will be the House Oversight Committee that takes the lead on that. And so yesterday, I thought it was intriguing that Michael Cohen mentioned in his testimony that he had briefed Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump, he said 10 times, about that proposed Trump Tower in Moscow, and it doesn't square with what Donald Trump Jr. told Congress when he spoke to them, which he had very little knowledge, if any, of Trump Tower. So could we see a scenario where we see Donald Trump Jr. and perhaps Ivanka Trump and the president's longtime chief financial officer of the Trump Foundation call to Congress to sort of go through the details of Cohen's testimony?
Well, Congress would like that a lot. At least Democrats in Congress would like to have all of them come before the House Oversight Committee. Whether they will be able to secure that testimony is another matter, partly because we know that Weisselberg, for instance, is cooperating with federal prosecutors who may not necessarily want him to come and spill what he knows publicly. So, yes, there are a lot of people who they want to talk to. Whether they'll be able to is another question. Now, when it comes to Trump Jr. and the question that you raised, Vlad, about whether he was truthful to Congress, many members of Congress have said that they believe this is only one area in which Donald Trump Jr. lied when he testified to various committees behind closed doors. And just as we have seen Michael Cohen and Roger Stone accused of lying to Congress by federal prosecutors, it's possible that this is something that could be awaiting Donald Trump Jr. as well. At least that's what a lot of Democrats here on Capitol Hill seem to think.
Nancy, before I let you go, can I just ask you briefly about what happened during the testimony yesterday when Congressman Mark Meadows had, in addressing Michael Cohen's claims that President Trump was a racist, asked Lynn Patton, a housing and urban development political appointee, to sort of come before the committee, and he sort of pointed to her and said, you know, if the president is racist, you know, how could he employ this woman who's African American, whose father, you know, was born in Alabama? And Michael Cohen responded, you know, my father is a survivor of the Holocaust, and I worked for Mr. Trump for 10 years. And there was a lot of blowback in the hearing, specifically from Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, but others in subsequent reporting over the last 24 hours who have wondered about the use of Ms. Patton as a prop for making a point. I'm curious about two things. One, Mark Meadows, in turning to Elijah Cummings, said, you know that I'm not a racist, as Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is suggesting or alleging. It appears that they do have a very warm relationship. So I wonder if you could just describe that and what other members are saying about that move by Congressman Meadows.
Sure, that was really a remarkable exchange, and it kind of got the hearing sidetracked for a while because it was so dramatic. Essentially, the point that Congresswoman Tlaib was making, and a number of other lawmakers of color on the committee agreed with her, is that bringing Lynn Patton there to the hearing to sort of sit silently in witness to President Trump's non-racism is kind of like saying, I have a black friend, so therefore I cannot be a racist. And she believed that it was wrong of Congressman Meadows to do that, to sort of have her, in Tlaib's words, serve as a prop at the hearing. Now, Patton later said that she didn't feel that she was a prop. She wanted to be there because she had a point to make. And Meadows, of course, took exception to Tlaib's comments and said, well, you're basically calling me a racist. Tlaib has now made it clear that she doesn't believe that he is a racist. She just felt that that was an insensitive act on his part. And of course, it being 2019, now a video from 2012 has surfaced where Congressman Meadows was talking about President Obama and said that we've got to get a Republican elected as president so we can send Mr. Obama back to Kenya or wherever he's from, which Meadows's opponents obviously have seized on as further evidence that he is racially insensitive. So that's kind of the backdrop to all of this back and forth right now. It was clearly, the question of President Trump's racially insensitive comments, what he said to Michael Cohen, what he has said in public, really wasn't supposed to be the primary focus of the hearing, but obviously it has gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah, and as you point out, Nancy, Congressman Meadows was visibly frustrated, angered by the comments by Rashida Tlaib. He seemed to almost tear up at some point when he turned to Chairman Cummings, and Chairman Cummings did get the proceedings moving along again. But as you say, there's this sort of a lot of context and backstory to this that I think a lot of people are interested in. So thank you for providing that much needed clarity, as always. Nancy Cordes, thank you.